Hey man, silence. It's the most underestimated form of communication in a relationship. It doesn't shout, it doesn't explain, it doesn't beg to be understood. It just exists. Heavy, still, undeniable. And when you finally learn to use it, it becomes the sharpest weapon in your emotional arsenal. Because here's what most men never realize. Women crave attention the way men crave peace. The moment you stop feeding that attention, the moment your energy goes quiet, she feels it in ways words could never reach. Words can be argued with, twisted, dismissed. But silence gives her nothing to push against. It doesn't react, it doesn't explain. It leaves her alone with her thoughts. And that is where the real pain begins. See, when you go silent, she loses control over the one thing she's always relied on, your reaction. Whether through arguments, emotional manipulation, or subtle guilt, she's used to steering your emotions like a ship. But your silence removes her power to do that. It creates uncertainty, and uncertainty drives her crazy. Because women are emotional navigators, they thrive on feedback. Every word, every tone, every look is a signal to them. And when you stop providing those signals, her internal compass begins to spin out of control. She'll start questioning everything. Is he mad at me? Is he over me? Is he seeing someone else? Did I push him too far? Her mind becomes her punishment, and you never had to lift a finger. That's the paradox. The quieter you become, the louder her anxiety gets. The reason silence hurts her more than words is because words can be countered. If you tell her you're upset, she can justify, manipulate, or comfort you. But when you say nothing, she's left alone to imagine why. And a woman's imagination is far more brutal than reality. She'll replay every past argument, every text she ignored, every time she tested you, thinking you'd never walk away. That mental replay becomes torture, because silence doesn't just make her wonder what's wrong, it makes her realize what she did wrong. It holds up a mirror she can't avoid, and the reflection isn't flattering. That's when guilt starts to take root. Slow, invasive, inescapable. She'll remember the man who once cared deeply and now acts as if she doesn't exist. That shift is what breaks her, not your absence, but the indifference behind it. At first, she'll try to dismiss it. She'll tell herself you're being dramatic, that you'll come around, that this is just another phase. But deep down, she knows something is different this time. Because your silence feels final. It doesn't carry the energy of punishment, it carries the energy of peace. And that's what terrifies her the most. She's used to men who explode, who shout, who beg, who argue, but not men who detach calmly. A calm man is unpredictable, unshakable, and unbothered. He doesn't need to prove anything. His absence says it all. That quiet confidence destroys her sense of superiority, because women are used to controlling emotional tempo. When you stop playing along, she realizes she's lost the one game she thought she'd mastered. Here's the secret. Most men don't understand. Silence is not the absence of power, it's the evolution of it. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop negotiating your worth. You're no longer trying to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. That silence says, I'm done trying to convince you. It's not loud, but it's absolute. It's the boundary she never thought you'd set. And in that boundary, she starts to crumble. Because the power she once drew from your emotional responses is gone. The leash of control she had around your heart snapped clean. Your silence becomes the echo of her own actions. She hears in it the sum of every time she ignored you, dismissed you, or pushed you away. Words could have been forgiven, but silence is the end. Over time, that silence becomes unbearable for her. She'll start testing the waters. A small text, a casual emoji, a random, hey stranger. It's her way of poking the silence to see if it still feels alive. But you, having learned your value, don't bite. You don't respond emotionally, maybe not at all. And that kills her, because now, you've become what every woman fears, emotionally unavailable by choice. Not because you can't love, but because you refuse to love where peace doesn't exist. Your silence now represents strength. It's the mark of a man who's no longer ruled by his emotions, but by his standards. That calm indifference, that still energy, it drives her mad, because she can't manipulate calm. She can't seduce discipline. She can't control silence. At night, that silence grows louder in her mind. It follows her into her thoughts, into her dreams, into every empty space she tried to fill with distraction. she'll find herself wondering what you're doing, not because she's curious, but because she's haunted by the absence of your attention. It's not the loss of you that hurts the most, it's the loss of your focus. Your energy once made her feel significant, desired, seen, and now that energy is gone, redirected inward toward your goals, your peace, your purpose. That shift is something women feel on a cellular level. When a man pulls his attention back, a woman feels it like a withdrawal, because attention to her is currency, and you've stopped paying. She'll try to fill that void, but nothing works. Other men might compliment her, text her, flatter her, but it doesn't land the same. Because their attention is cheap, easy, immediate. Yours had depth, presence, intent. It was earned. And once a woman experiences a man's focused attention, the kind that sees through her mask, not just her body, she can't go back to shallow affection. So when you go silent, you're not just gone, you're irreplaceable. Every man after you feels like a downgrade, and the more she tries to move on, the more she realizes how much you grounded her. That's when silence becomes unbearable, because it forces her to face the fact that she lost not just a man, but the mirror of her best self. Eventually, she'll reach a stage of quiet desperation. She won't show it publicly, but it's there. The tension, the longing, the frustration of not being able to read you anymore. Your silence will start rewriting her memory. She'll start questioning the story she told herself. Maybe you weren't the problem. Maybe she was too impulsive, too proud, too dismissive. That's when she'll finally understand the truth that words could never teach her. Silence reveals reality. Your silence has turned her inner world upside down. It's made her confront her own patterns, her own flaws, her own arrogance. It's taught her that a man's distance can carry more honesty than his words ever could. And that's why silence hurts, because it forces her to see what she refused to hear. And when she finally breaks down, when she's alone with the weight of everything unsaid, she'll realize something profound. That silence was never meant to punish her. It was meant to protect you. It was your way of preserving your dignity, your peace, your self-respect. It was you saying, "I choose me this time." And that realization will echo in her forever. Because she'll understand that she pushed away a man who didn't need to shout, beg, or prove his worth. She lost a man who mastered himself. And that's the kind of man a woman never forgets. Your silence became your victory, and long after her words fade, long after her excuses lose their meaning, it's your silence that will keep speaking, calm, steady, powerful, reminding her that peace always wins over chaos. As time drags on, that silence becomes her teacher, and not a gentle one. It forces her to face what she's always run from herself. When your voice is gone, her own becomes deafening. The doubts she silenced, the insecurities she buried, the guilt she denied, they all start to echo in her head. And unlike your words, she can't argue with her own conscience. That's why your silence hurts in ways your presence never could. It strips away the comfort of distraction and exposes the emotional void beneath her pride. Every man before you who argued, pleaded, or fought gave her something to push back against, but your silence gives her nothing, and nothing, ironically, becomes everything. Because it shows her exactly how much noise she created to avoid seeing her own emptiness. She'll remember every time you tried to communicate before, every time you calmly explained what you needed, every time you voiced your concerns with sincerity, every time you gave her the chance to meet you halfway. Back then, she brushed it off. She thought your patience was weakness, your composure was coldness, your consistency was boredom. But now, through your silence, she finally understands. You weren't asking for much, just effort, just respect, just emotional reciprocity. And when you stopped asking, it wasn't because you didn't care. It was because you finally realized that begging for what should be freely given is a waste of masculine energy. Your silence now holds the weight of every ignored warning, every overlooked red flag, every moment you realize that loving her cost you your peace. The most painful part of silence is that it makes her see the contrast. She remembers how your voice used to calm her storms, how your presence used to ground her chaos, how your words once felt like a safety net. Now, that safety is gone, replaced by stillness, and that stillness feels unbearable because it forces her to see the difference between real love and attention. She used to think your attention was something she could manipulate, something she could control, but now she understands that your attention was sacred and she wasted it. When a man like you goes silent, it's not an act of revenge, it's an act of self-preservation, and that's what stings the most, realizing that the man she thought would never leave her peace behind has chosen his peace over her. Your silence also changes the way she remembers the past, the arguments, the tension, the moments she thought were proof that you cared less. They all start to look different now. She begins to see that you weren't angry because you were insecure, you were angry because you were invested. You weren't cold because you didn't care, you were calm because you were tired. Every time she accused you of not understanding her, she now sees you actually understood her too well, and that scared her, because being understood means being exposed. And no one wants to be exposed when they're not ready to face themselves. That's why your silence hits deeper than any fight ever could. It doesn't just end communication, it ends illusion. Slowly, her ego begins to break. What used to feel like empowerment now feels like emptiness. The validation she used to get from being chased no longer satisfies her because she knows what it's missing. You, not your presence, but your intention. You never loved her out of boredom or loneliness. You loved her with purpose. And now that she's surrounded by people who only love her for convenience, she feels the difference deeply. She misses the way your love had structure, the way it made her feel safe, the way it demanded accountability. And though she'll never admit it aloud, she misses the way your silence used to mean something. Because now, your silence means distance, and distance means loss. And no woman wants to admit that she lost a man who once made her feel grounded in a world that constantly made her feel replaceable. What makes silence such a powerful weapon isn't its sharpness, it's its patience. It doesn't seek to destroy, it waits for realization, and realization always comes. You see, words create noise, but silence creates space, and in that space truth reveals itself. She starts to see how much of what she called love was really control, how much of what she called communication was manipulation, how much of what she thought was passion was actually dysfunction. She starts to see you not as the man she lost, but as the mirror she broke because she couldn't handle her own reflection. That's the real punishment, not your silence itself, but what it shows her. That while she was busy trying to win emotional games, you were busy outgrowing them. And the longer you stay silent, the more power it gains. Because silence has layers. The first layer is confusion. She wonders why you're quiet. The second layer is frustration. She tries to provoke a response. The third is realization. She understands why you're gone. And the final one? Acceptance. The painful awareness that your silence has become permanent. That's when she truly breaks. Because now, there's no undoing it. No apology that can erase the distance. No text that can rebuild the bridge. No excuse that can restore the respect she lost. You see, silence isn't just withdrawal. It's closure without a conversation. And that's the part she'll never recover from. Knowing that you ended the story without needing to say a word. Meanwhile, your silence has become your greatest transformation. What she interprets as detachment is actually discipline. You've learned that not every emotion deserves expression, not every argument deserves energy, and not every relationship deserves resurrection. You've grown from needing to be understood to being content with being misunderstood. That's the mark of a strong man, one who no longer chases clarity from chaos. Your silence isn't coldness, it's maturity. It's you choosing to protect your peace instead of proving your point. And that shift in energy, that quiet confidence, is exactly what she can feel but can't explain. It's why she keeps thinking about you, even when she tries not to. Because calmness, once felt, can never be forgotten. As months pass, she begins to notice how your silence has shaped her behavior. She's less impulsive now, less reactive, more introspective. Without realizing it, she's trying to match the very stillness that once frustrated her. She's beginning to understand what you were trying to teach her all along. That peace is not found in control, but in surrender. You didn't walk away because you didn't love her. You walked away because you loved yourself enough not to stay in a place that disrespected your value. And now, she's learning that same lesson, painfully, slowly, but inevitably. Because that's what silence does. It doesn't destroy, it transforms. It takes time, but when it finally hits, it changes people in ways words never can. And when the lesson finally sinks in, she'll see it for what it really was. Not punishment, not revenge, but a boundary. Your silence was the moment you said, "I'm done explaining to people, committed to misunderstanding me." It was the line between the man who was emotionally reactive and the man who became emotionally intelligent. It was your evolution in motion. And by the time she understands that, you'll be too far gone, not out of bitterness, but out of peace. Because peace doesn't announce itself, it just arrives, stays, and protects you from ever going back. That's the beauty of silence. It doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. It doesn't need to be heard to be understood. It just is. And in that stillness, you finally find what she never could. There comes a moment, quiet, almost sacred, when your silence begins to take on a life of its own. It's no longer just an absence of sound, it's a presence that fills every room she walks into. She could be laughing with friends, scrolling through her phone, pretending she's moved on, but deep inside, that silence sits there like a shadow. It's not what you said that haunts her, it's everything you didn't say, every unread message, every day you didn't check her story, every night you didn't call. She starts realizing that your silence has meaning, that it isn't accidental, it's intentional, it's discipline disguised as distance, and that discipline becomes your greatest power. Because women are emotional creatures, they connect through energy, through attention, through response. When all of that disappears, it leaves a vacuum, and nature hates a vacuum. So her mind begins filling the silence with her own fears, her own guilt, her own regrets. That's when silence stops being a weapon and becomes a mirror. It shows her not who you are, but who she was when she thought she'd never lose you. What she doesn't realize, at least not immediately, is that your silence isn't about punishing her, it's about reclaiming yourself. You're not ignoring her out of spite, you're preserving your peace. Because there's a difference between anger and indifference. Anger still means she has a hold on you, it means she can pull you into her chaos. But indifference, that's spiritual immunity. It means you've detached fully and finally. It means her emotional storms no longer reach your shores, and that drives her mad. Because she used to be able to stir you up with a single text, a single tear, a single accusation. Now, none of it works. You don't flinch, you don't argue, you don't explain. You simply observe. That quiet observation feels like judgment, even though it isn't. It's just you standing firm in your own energy, unmoved, unreactive. She starts to feel exposed, like she's screaming into an empty canyon, and the only sound she hears is her own echo. That's the pain that silence creates. It's not loud, but it's deep, deeper than any insult, deeper than any argument. As the days stretch into weeks, something subtle starts happening. Your silence begins to erode her certainty. The confidence she once wore like armor starts cracking. The woman who once believed she could replace you easily begins to realize how wrong she was. Every man she tries to talk to feels hollow. They smile too quickly, they agree too easily, they lack the depth that made you so rare. You see, your silence taught her something no conversation ever could. It showed her the value of presence. And once a woman experiences a man whose presence commands peace, she can never be satisfied with noise again. That's why your silence haunts her, because she doesn't just miss you, she misses the feeling of being understood without words, seen without judgment, loved without conditions. But she destroyed that, and now, your silence serves as a monument to her own self-sabotage. Every time she tries to move on, your absence whispers to her, "You did this." Silence changes you too. At first, it hurts, not because you miss her, but because you're detoxing from the addiction of emotional chaos. You were used to explaining yourself, defending your love, fighting to be heard. Silence forces you to sit with yourself. It strips away all the noise, all the distractions, all the illusions, and what's left is clarity. You start to see how much energy you wasted trying to fix someone who never intended to meet you halfway. You begin to understand that peace isn't found in connection, it's found in control. Control over your reactions, over your focus, over your time. You stop chasing closure because you realize closure isn't given, it's created. You build it through acceptance, you find it in silence, and that quiet growth terrifies her more than anything else. Because while she's still trying to fill the void with noise, you've learned how to fill it with purpose. You've turned pain into productivity. Your silence, once an act of restraint, becomes a source of rebirth. And the beauty of that transformation is that you don't need to announce it. Real change never needs an audience. You stop talking about self-respect and start living it. You stop explaining your boundaries and start embodying them. People can feel when a man has reclaimed his energy. It's not arrogance, it's gravity. It pulls respect toward you without effort. And when she eventually sees you again, whether it's through a mutual friend, a social post, or a random encounter, she'll feel that gravity instantly. She'll notice how still you are, how unfazed, how calm. It'll unnerve her because that kind of silence radiates power. It says, "I'm not angry, I'm healed." And that sentence, unsaid, unspoken, but deeply felt, will destroy her, because she'll realize that all her noise, all her games, all her attempts to control the emotional rhythm of the relationship, they all failed. You won not by shouting, not by explaining, not by proving, but by going silent. And in that silence, you became everything she thought she'd never lose, a man who no longer needs her to feel complete. As time stretches on, the silence you've built begins to take on an entirely new meaning in her world. It's no longer just a space between you, it becomes a symbol of everything she lost, but didn't value. Every night she lies awake scrolling through her phone, resisting the urge to message you, pretending that she doesn't care, but that pretense is fragile. It cracks every time her thoughts drift toward you. Every time she remembers your calmness, your steady tone, the way your presence used to make her feel anchored. Now, her new reality is restless. The men she entertains don't challenge her. They praise her too much. They agree too easily. They lack the stillness that once made her feel safe. They talk endlessly. And yet, none of their words can compete with the weight of your silence, because your silence has become more powerful than any voice in her life. It lingers, it questions, it reminds her that once upon a time she was seen, truly seen, and she took that for granted. You see, silence has a strange way of rewriting emotional memory. It makes her forget the reasons she pushed you away, and remember only the way she felt when you were near. She won't recall the arguments or the misunderstandings. She'll only recall the warmth of your consistency, the subtle protection in your demeanor, the quiet confidence you carried, even when she tested your patience. That's what women fall for in hindsight, the stability they dismissed when they thought chaos was excitement. Your silence has now become the story she tells herself before she sleeps, a story where she was loved by a man who expected nothing but respect, and she couldn't give it. That thought doesn't fade. It festers. It makes her restless. It makes her realize that while she was chasing temporary highs, she lost the man who could have grounded her for life. And the irony, she now finds herself addicted to the very peace she once complained was boring. Silence doesn't just change her perception of you. It exposes her to herself. It shows her how emotionally dependent she was on your validation, how her ego disguised its need for your approval as self-confidence. Without your emotional energy feeding her, she starts to crumble. That's when the regret sets in. She'll start looking for excuses to reach out, but every possible text sounds desperate in her head. "How have you been?" feels hollow. "I miss you" feels too vulnerable. "Let's talk" feels like surrender. So she says nothing, trapped in the same silence she once mocked. But now she's on the receiving end of it, and she finally understands the lesson. That silence isn't absence, it's consequence. It's what happens when you teach someone what peace feels like, and they mistake it for weakness. Now, she sits in her own quiet, realizing that peace was never boring, it was safety, and she destroyed it. Meanwhile, your silence has turned into wisdom. You've stopped idealizing women and started understanding them. You now see patterns where you once saw potential. You recognize that love isn't about intensity, it's about alignment. You've learned that you don't have to explain your worth to anyone, and that real masculine strength lies not in control but in emotional restraint. Every time you choose silence, you choose mastery over yourself, over your impulses, over the chaos that others bring. You've discovered that peace isn't passive, it's power under control, and because of that, you've become untouchable. No drama can shake you, no manipulation can reach you, no false apology can lure you back. You've become the man who no longer needs to speak to be understood. Your energy now does the talking, quiet, composed, certain, and that energy is what every woman, deep down, craves but rarely finds. Eventually, she'll come to terms with the hardest truth of all, that your silence wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the beginning of your transformation. It marked the death of the version of you that needed her validation and the birth of the version that thrives without it. She'll scroll through your photos, maybe hear your name in passing, and feel that strange ache in her chest, the one that whispers, he's really gone. But it won't just be physical distance she feels, it's emotional distance. She knows now that even if she reached out, even if you replied, even if she stood in front of you, the man she once knew doesn't exist anymore. Silence changed you. It built walls of calm where chaos used to live. It turned your pain into composure, your heartbreak into clarity, and your love into discipline. And she'll never forgive herself for forcing you to evolve into the man she always wanted, but too late to have. Because silence may not make noise, but it leaves echoes that never fade. As weeks turn into months, the silence between you evolves into something almost spiritual. It's no longer about who's right or wrong, who left or who stayed. It becomes about energy. The kind of energy that used to intertwine your souls now separates you with clarity. She starts to sense it energetically, long before she ever admits it to herself. That low-level anxiety that creeps into her chest when she sees your name, that dull ache when a memory of you crosses her mind, that's not longing, that's realization. Realization that she lost something pure. You were never just a man to her, you were the calm before every storm she ever created. You gave her safety from herself, and now that you're gone, her chaos feels heavier, darker, and more personal. That's why your silence hurts so much. It doesn't remind her of you. It reminds her of her own instability. She begins to feel small in comparison to the peace she once took for granted, because now she's surrounded by the very noise she thought she loved. It's at this point that she begins to rationalize her pain. She tells herself stories to survive your absence, stories like, he never really cared, or I'm better off. But deep down, she doesn't believe them. They're not truths, they're survival mechanisms. She repeats them in her head to drown out the truth that keeps whispering you cared more than anyone else ever did. And that truth haunts her because it means that she broke something that can't be replaced. She'll try to recreate it with other men. She'll seek your energy in their faces, your voice in their messages, your patience in their temper, but it never feels the same. That's because your silence has made her more aware than ever. You've become the reference point for what real masculinity feels like, composed, grounded, emotionally sovereign, and now every man she meets feels like a copy of a copy. No matter what she does, you're the original. The silence ensures that. You see, the beauty of silence lies in how it matures a man. You no longer crave validation. You no longer need to prove you're the good guy. You've realized that your worth isn't measured by how much pain you can endure for someone else. It's measured by how quickly you can walk away from disrespect. Silence makes you dangerous because it gives you emotional control, and emotional control is the highest form of masculine power. You stop reacting and start observing. You stop pleading and start choosing. You stop chasing and start attracting. Every time she checks your social media or hears your name from someone else, she feels that power. It's not the kind that intimidates, it's the kind that reminds her you've outgrown her reach. You've entered a space where her validation no longer matters, and that's when your silence transforms from something that hurts her to something that heals you. But silence doesn't just heal, it humbles. It forces you to look inward, to confront the part of yourself that once begged for love from people who didn't even respect themselves. It makes you question why you tolerated so much, why you fought to be seen when you were already enough. Through silence, you stop chasing external understanding and start cultivating inner peace. You begin to see relationships not as validation, but as reflection. You realize that her treatment of you was never about your worth, it was about her wounds. That's the liberation silence gives you. It teaches you that not every loss is a tragedy. Sometimes it's divine intervention disguised as heartbreak. And as you evolve, you stop missing her and start thanking her. Because her indifference, her disrespect, her emotional inconsistency, they all pushed you toward the man you were meant to become. Silence was just a tool God gave you to finally listen to yourself. Meanwhile, she's still stuck in a cycle she doesn't understand. The silence you imposed is now shaping her thoughts like an invisible hand. Every time she tries to move on, she feels that tug in her chest, the one that tells her she's trying to replace something she doesn't even understand. Her friends will tell her, he'll come back, or forget him, he's not worth it. But deep inside, she knows that's not true. She knows she lost a man who didn't need her, a man who could love her and walk away in the same breath. That's what makes silence so devastating. It makes her realize that you were never trapped by emotion, you were guided by discipline. And once a man finds that kind of discipline, no woman can control him again. So she starts doing what all women do when they lose control. She tests, she posts, she provokes, hoping to get any kind of response from you. But when you don't respond, the silence grows louder. It starts echoing inside her until it becomes unbearable. Your silence is now doing what no amount of talking ever could. It's teaching her what respect feels like in reverse, teaching her that actions have weight, teaching her that when a man goes quiet, it's not always because he's weak, it's because he's wise. And that lesson is painful because it forces her to look at herself without the soft filter of denial. She begins to see how her ego drove away genuine connection, how her pride turned love into competition, how her insecurities turned affection into manipulation. And all the while, you say nothing. That's the brilliance of it. You're not teaching through confrontation, you're teaching through absence. You're allowing the universe to do the explaining for you, because silence doesn't argue, it reveals. And the more she sits in that revelation, the more she realizes that she didn't just lose a man, she lost a mirror that reflected the best version of herself. Silence becomes sacred when you understand its purpose. It's not about making someone miss you, it's about returning to your center. It's about shifting the focus from why did she do this to what can I learn from this. It's a spiritual detox. The more you remain quiet, the more clarity you gain. You start to understand patterns, energies, red flags you once ignored. You see the manipulation for what it was, not what your heart wanted it to be. You stop needing closure from her because you find closure within yourself. And in that stillness, something profound happens. You stop seeing her as the villain and start seeing her as the lesson. That shift turns pain into purpose. It's the point where the silence no longer hurts. It heals. It stops being about her and starts being about you. That's the moment a boy becomes a man, and a man becomes unshakable. By now, your silence has reshaped the dynamic completely. She once had the power because she had your attention. Now, you have the power because you've withdrawn it. You've proven something most men never do, that your energy is valuable, that your peace is priceless, and that your love doesn't come without standards. That realization will linger in her mind forever. Even if she finds someone else, she'll measure him against you, and that comparison will never be in his favor, because no one competes with the man who chose peace over validation. You've become the silent benchmark of what she truly desires, but will never admit, a man who doesn't need her, yet still once wanted her. That paradox will live in her mind rent-free for years, replaying every time she sees a man who talks too much, reacts too fast, or tries too hard. Because deep down, she knows, real power never announces itself, it just stays silent and lets others feel its weight. And while she's drowning in that realization, you've already moved into a new chapter of your life. You've stopped explaining your silence because the people meant for you will never need an explanation. You've stopped fighting to be understood because you've learned that peace is found in being at ease with being misunderstood. You walk differently now, not with arrogance, but with awareness. You no longer chase love, you attract respect. You no longer fall for potential, you align with energy. Silence has purified you. It's filtered out the noise, the weakness, the desperation. You've become a man who leads with presence instead of persuasion. And that presence commands attention effortlessly. You don't have to chase anymore because your stillness has become magnetic. You don't speak to impress. You speak to express truth when it matters, and when it doesn't, your silence says everything. And that's the ultimate power of silence. It transforms everything it touches. It makes love purer, pain wiser, and men stronger. It strips away illusion and leaves only truth behind. When you master silence, you stop reacting to the world and start directing your own energy. You become untouchable, not because you're cold, but because you're centered. That's when she finally understands what she lost. Not just a man, but a force. A man who didn't need to raise his voice to make an impact. a man whose peace was more powerful than her pride. And the cruelest part? She'll realize it when it's too late, when your silence has already turned into serenity. That's when she'll know you were never trying to win her back. You were teaching her what it feels like to lose something real, and no amount of noise will ever fill the quiet you left behind. Over time, your silence stops being just a reaction. It becomes a language of its own. It speaks of boundaries, discipline, and evolution. It tells the world that you no longer operate from desperation, but from intention. People notice it, even if they can't articulate it. Your presence now carries a stillness that commands respect, not demand it. It's in the way you walk, the way you pause before speaking, the way you choose not to engage in meaningless noise. This kind of energy is rare, and women feel it instantly. The same woman who once tested your patience, who believed she could control the emotional tempo between you, now finds herself thrown off balance by the calm you embody. Because silence, once learned, becomes magnetic. It draws in curiosity, but repels chaos. It becomes both your armor and your aura, protecting your peace while amplifying your power. You've entered a realm where your stillness says what words never could. I'm not angry, I'm free. Meanwhile, her world starts to unravel in slow motion. The very silence that once infuriated her now becomes the soundtrack of her regret. She checks her phone, not because she expects your message, but because she hopes for the impossible, that maybe your silence will break, that maybe you'll still care, but you don't. Not out of bitterness, but because you've healed past the point of needing to prove your worth to someone who didn't see it. Her ego begins to starve. She tries to replace your absence with distractions. New men, new plans, new posts, but nothing hits the same. You've become the standard she can't meet again. The silence has rewired her perception of value. She now realizes that your attention wasn't something to play with, it was something to protect. Every man she meets afterward will feel like noise compared to the quiet authority you left behind. And that's the cruel poetry of silence. It makes a woman miss the peace she once mistook for boredom. The longer you remain silent, the more you detach from the illusions that once ruled you. You stop seeing women as salvation and start viewing them as reflections of where you are mentally. The ones who chase drama no longer excite you. The ones who play emotional games no longer confuse you. You've seen behind the curtain. You understand how attention is the currency of attraction and how scarcity creates desire, so you no longer give freely what must be earned. Your silence, once reactive, is now strategic. It's not about withholding love, it's about preserving energy. You realize that a man's greatest mistake isn't losing a woman, it's losing himself trying to keep her. And that's a mistake you'll never repeat. Because silence, when mastered, doesn't create distance, it creates dignity. It draws a clear line between who you were and who you've become. And once you reach that level of awareness, you never go back to explaining yourself again. She'll keep trying to figure you out long after you've stopped thinking about her. That's what silence does. It lingers in the mind of those who once underestimated it. She'll replay every moment, every argument, every time you didn't respond the way she expected. She'll analyze your old texts, your tone, your pauses. She'll try to decode what went wrong, but she won't find answers because silence doesn't leave explanations, it leaves impact. And while she's drowning in what-ifs, you'll be living in peace. That's the ultimate shift. While she's stuck in memory, you've moved into mastery. You've learned to love without attachment, to care without control, to give without losing yourself. Silence taught you emotional sovereignty. It showed you that not every feeling needs to be expressed, not every battle needs to be fought, and not every woman deserves to hear your truth. Sometimes the most powerful statement a man can make is none at all. In time, your silence becomes more than just strength. It becomes your philosophy. You start applying it to everything. When people gossip, you stay quiet. When someone provokes, you stay calm. When life throws challenges your way, you pause before reacting. This inner stillness becomes your secret weapon. You begin to attract higher quality people, deeper opportunities, and stronger respect. Not because you've changed what you say, but because you've changed what you don't. That's the paradox of silence. The less you speak, the more you are heard. The less you reveal, the more mysterious you become. And that mystery is magnetic. It's the same reason women chase the men who don't need them and respect the men who don't explain themselves. Silence gives you that aura. an unspoken confidence that can't be faked. It's the quiet, knowing that your time, your peace, and your attention are luxuries. And once you start treating them that way, everyone else will too. She'll notice the glow up, even if she doesn't admit it. She'll see your calmness, your success, your new sense of direction, and it'll sting. Because she'll realize that all the chaos she brought into your life ended up fueling your transformation. You used her rejection as redirection. You turned heartbreak into hunger. You replaced overthinking with overachieving, and she'll feel that, not through your words, but through your silence. Every photo you post, every move you make, every time you don't acknowledge her existence, it communicates something powerful. You moved on without closure, without revenge, without resentment. That's what truly breaks her. Not your anger, not your arguments, but your peace. Because peace is the one thing she can't fake, and the one thing she can't have while she's still trying to fill the void you left behind. Your silence has now evolved beyond the personal. It's become spiritual. It's not just about her anymore. It's about your alignment with yourself. You've learned to hear the voice within that used to be drowned out by noise. You've stopped chasing what doesn't align with your purpose. You've realized that sometimes God removes people from your life because you were starting to idolize them. Silence became the tool that separated attachment from awareness. It showed you that real love doesn't demand your peace, it complements it. And once you understand that, you stop settling for anything that disturbs your spirit. That's when you step into true masculine energy. Not loud, not aggressive, but steady, grounded, and silent. You've become the calm in the storm, not the storm itself. And from that place of power, you no longer chase women, you attract destiny. Ironically, your silence will make her talk more than she ever has. She'll start hinting through mutual friends, dropping subtle posts, trying to get your attention indirectly. Every move she makes will be designed to test if your silence still stands, but you won't move. You'll stay grounded, centered, detached, because now you understand, attention is a gift, and silence is its guardian. The man who knows when to be silent is the man who controls the emotional rhythm of every interaction. She may think she's strong because she doesn't text you, but you're stronger because you don't even think about it. That's the difference between someone who plays games and someone who's mastered the game. She's reacting, you're observing. She's performing, you're evolving. She's loud, you're still. And in that stillness, your silence continues to echo, reminding her that she never lost you to another woman. She lost you to your own peace. With time, silence becomes your standard for everything in life. You realize that those who truly love you will never make you beg for clarity. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop trying to prove your worth to those who can't see it. You simply stay quiet and let time expose truth. Silence becomes your filter. It removes the fake, reveals the loyal, and strengthens the real. And that's when you fully grasp the lesson behind it all. Silence was never about her. It was about you returning to yourself. It was about learning that solitude isn't loneliness, it's freedom. You start enjoying your own company, your own energy, your own path. You start building, creating, growing. And ironically, when you reach this point, the world starts chasing what you've become, especially her, because nothing is more irresistible to the human mind than a man who found peace in his own absence. In the end, silence wins, not because it's loud, but because it's lasting. Words fade, arguments blur, emotions cool, but silence endures. It's the final chapter and the eternal echo. It's what separates men who react from men who evolve. You no longer need closure, apologies, or validation. You understand now that her absence was a blessing, not a betrayal. Because without her noise, you would have never found your own stillness. Without her leaving, you would have never learned how to stay grounded. Silence taught you that real strength isn't in holding on, it's in letting go without hate. And the beautiful irony, one day she'll sit alone, hearing nothing but the silence she once mocked, and realize it was never her weapon, it was yours. Because silence doesn't just end relationships, it redefines them, and yours will forever be remembered as the moment you stopped talking and started mastering yourself.